coach giving me love, I got to love it. I love myself, too.
Sean says you never have a bad day. Is that true?
It's going to be hard to find me with a bad day. I always have bad days, but when you're out here doing what you love and you kind of take that approach to every single day and you get a chance to work with a bunch of guys that you really respect, talking about the defensive staff and Ejiro Evero, Jonathan Cooley, you're talking about Henny, you're talking about all the guys that work with Marcus, now Lance, obviously Thad, all those guys, man, those guys bring a lot to it, with Shula. Those guys bring a lot to it. They give you that joy, that energy, and especially with the guys we have coaching. So that's part of it. Your environment is part of it. The people you talk to and work with every day is definitely helpful. So
we see you putting hands on a lot, working with, for instance, 3 D-backs early in practice today. What makes something that specific the job for a coordinator?
When you're a coordinator and you like to call yourself an active coordinator, I like to let those guys use me how they can in Indy. So if they call upon my assistants in Indy to help with any type of drill, that's what I'm there for. So when we break some of those drills up to get individual teaching for individual people, you want to use all your people. You want to pour as much as you can to every single person on our football team. I believe we're about 88 deep. If you can give all that to all those guys and use every single coach you got and get the most out of everybody and just be in the moment, at that point, I'm Jonathan Cooley's assistant. And if you ask me to do something for an individual, let's go to work and do it.
Raheem, a lot of people who've worked with you in the past and former players have talked about how you just have this knack for meeting guys where they're at. Where do you think that comes from? And what are some of maybe like quirks or nuances you've noticed about some of the personalities on this roster?
Jordan, it's funny, man. It's just everywhere you go, everybody's going to be different. All the people are going to be different. All the guys, all the unique skill sets. And you find ways to push each other's buttons. And when you find those ways to push people's buttons, you got to push them. And some days you got to push them in practice when there's dog days, like today. When you start off sluggish, you start off a little bit slow. You know whose buttons you can push to get things going. And today it was Taylor Rapp. He ignited us with a big pro thud. And then after that, I got the defense going. And I got us all talking and involved with everybody. And then sometimes you got to involve the offensive coaches. When you got days like this when it's a little bit hot, it's a little bit warm, you got to pull them through. And then today was our job as coaches to pull our guys through. So you got to find out which button to push from each player, each coach, the team. You can't have a bad day. There's no room, there's no era, there's no space for a bad day in football. So let's go out here and make the most out of all these days.
Do you push Aaron Donald's button?
Haven't found those yet. I think Coach talked about a guy being one of one. You got to protect him from himself, and that's exactly what our head coach does and our strength staff and, obviously our VP and Reggie Scott. They do a great job in protecting our team and keeping us in the best physical condition that we can be in. And our athletic performance team here is phenomenal. And we respect those things, and Aaron Donald respects those things. And he has his own button, and you can. If you give him the right time, you give him the right moment, and you ask him to do something above and beyond, he's going to give you everything he can to do it.
Yesterday he was telling, for him, he's really just working on technique. For you, how do you balance technique versus conditioning versus the system at this point in training camp?
It's always about the system when you're talking about training camp. It's always talking about your family and bonding and building your team when you're talking about training camp. But when you're talking about technique, you're talking about each individual person. And when each individual person can lean on that technique, that's going to take you further down the road. When you have the bumps and the bruises, when you have the nicks, you can always rely on your technique. And if those guys have the ability to rely on those things, then you get great players. And when great players use great technique at the end of their career and moving forward towards their career, you see great players play for a long time, a la Tom Brady. A la some of the guys we've coached in the past, like a Rondé Barber. And Aaron Donald would be no different. I don't even know what year it is for him, but I know he plays with great technique, he plays with great energy, and he's also the best football player on the planet. So he's a lot of fun to watch and be around.
How would you assess where you guys are at on defense for what you want to accomplish through training camp?
Lindsay, it's really hard to say where you're at on defense. You obviously got to go play against some other people. But I like where we're at with the energy. I like where we're at from a learning curve. I like where we're at from a mentality standpoint and the guys buying into what we're trying to sell. And we got to go out there and we got to make those splash plays and those plays that make a difference in the game. We like to call them mad plays, make a difference plays, right? So if you go out and you establish that culture and you establish those things, you'll be the best defense. Statistically, everybody gets caught up in those things. My saying is stature for losers, but if we can go out and make those memorable plays, those plays that make a difference in the game to help us win football games, that's all I'm here for and that's all I care about.
Leonard told me you're quite the jokester. You like to pick on the guys a lot. Who would you say is the easiest guy to pick on?
It's hard to say who the easiest is. I know how to push a couple of the guys' buttons right now, and I like to do it with comedy at times. Sometimes you get brutal, honest truth, and you do it with a smile on your face, and people take it in a completely different way. You know, and sometimes you can give it to them in a stern fashion and sit them down and let them know what you're really saying, and it is what it is. You know, when you're talking to Jalen Ramsey and you tell him the absolute truth, he's with you when you're right, as they say it. And he's been with us a lot right now. And if you can keep him that locked-in fashion, that locked-in stage, he's definitely one of my favorites to pick on, along with the others. But those guys, they do a nice job of really rebounding from my jokes or my comedy and teaching.
How big of a help do you see Leonard being on this defense?
You know, Leonard is a special player, man. I just know you get around him more and more every day. You know, he comes off as a quiet person. He is not. He is to himself. You know, but when he's to himself, he's about his business. And when you ask him to go above and beyond, like today, ask him to push the young guys and really coach those guys and lean into them, and he did. And you have the ability to do those things, and you bring him out, you know you're going to get the best out of him every single day. So he's like one of my favorites to go at that way and let him lead in his quiet type demeanor.
So that outside linebacker spot opposite Leonard, are you looking for another pass rusher? Or do you want maybe a more complete player to help balance things out?
It's so hard to say you're looking for a pass rusher. You know, you're talking about outside linebacker. That's the #1 job, right? So you're talking about Collins going out there giving you something. You're talking about Obo going out there giving you something. You're talking about some of the young guys. You know, you got Lawler, you got Daka, you got all the guys out there competing for spots. You know, Chris. All those guys out there playing. You definitely want pass rush, and you definitely want to use the other factors. You definitely want to use that brutal force, that ability to set edges, and you definitely want to go out there and be able to have a little bit of coverage and be able to drop and do some different things, right? Those unique players on defense make you special. When they have the ability to do everything, it's really nice. When they have the ability to rush the passers, they're dominant.
Going back to Lindsey's question about assessing the defense, what are you looking to get out of the joint practice on Saturday against the Cowboys? What do you want to see out of your unit?
You know, we're going to get great work. You know, obviously, Coach Sean, he emphasizes the ones in those groups. You know, we'll get a chance to communicate with our opposing team and tell those guys what we want to do and how we want to go get it accomplished. As far as the physicality, as far as the tempo, as far as pushing into a game-like atmosphere as close as possible, really getting great work that day. You know, although we get it here amongst each other, the last 2 days have been great. You know, it's nothing like going against another color. It's nothing like going against another team and going out there and seeing different plays and different types of deals to get it going.
You've got a couple of young, up-and-coming defensive linemen battling for maybe 1 or 2 spots. We've got a couple of young, up-and-coming safeties doing the same thing. Maybe even some linebackers on the inside. What are you seeing from those guys?
Nothing but greatness. You know, you got to fall back on their coaches. You know, your coaches go out there and coach those guys from the bottom of the roster up. And you got to make it hard on management. You got to make it hard on the decision makers. You got to make it as hard as you possibly can. I love what we're getting from our young guys at the D-line position. I love what we're getting from our young guys at the secondary position. It's a credit to our scouting department and what they've been able to bring in. It's a credit to our general manager and Les. It's a credit to Sean McVay and how well they've worked together to formulate exactly what they look for in players in order to bring to the organization to compete. We're going to compete at a high level. You know, it's the we not me mentality, as you guys have known here from Sean, and it is certainly lived every single day in all the position groups.
Obviously, you and Sean were together during the off-season program out on the field, but what's it been like kind of in the training camp setting to reunite and get back out there with Sean?
There's nothing like it. You know, I love the intensity from Sean. You know, you're talking about a guy that's intense no matter what he's doing, playing cards, playing pickup basketball, you know, on the field. He's always got the ability to do those things. So when you're on the field with him, he certainly has a way of raising the level of expectation of what he wants in the game. He can make it a game-like environment at any time with some call-it periods. He can make it a game-like environment at any time by putting the guys on the side. I love the mentality of getting the coaches off the field, letting these guys play. I love the idea of having the coaches on the side, making you see it from where you need to see it in the game. So the intensity from Sean is something that I just love being involved in.
Please pick up basketball.
He would play whatever you want to play if you're down to go out there and compete.
Is he good?
He is one of those guys. I'm not going to say he's good, but he's going to try hard.
Center, right?
Hey, he can play whatever he wants to play. He's got pretty good hops. If he loses, he's going to be practicing when you're not looking. I can promise you that.
How many decisions are there still to be made in the secondary?
You're always talking about great decisions that you got to make. You know, you lost 2 great players, and John Johnson, obviously, and Deuce. When you lose those type of players that have been starters around here for such a long time, you got to replace those guys. And you got some people in the building that played a little bit when they didn't play, or played at times, at other times, like the Burgesses, like the Taylor Rapps. And you got some people that's going to be up and coming, like the D-Lows, you know, obviously the David Longs and some of those type of guys. And then, you know, you lost Robert Rochelle for a little bit. You want to see when he comes back and what he's able to do. But, you know, you got to replace those type of people. There's going to be some decisions that's going to be made. And it's going to come down to the end. And these guys know it. You know, competition's at a high level here, and it'll continue to be that way as long as Sean McVay's here.
All right.
Have a good one, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.